Confucius was born in the Duchy of Lu in China, grew up in poverty, and lost his parents as a child. Even with this rough early life, his teachings have impacted China centuries after his lifetime. Though he is not credited with writing anything, his main teachings were recorded by his disciples in the Analects. This written record is the main source for the ideology of Confucianism. In the Analects, the main principles of how to be the superior man are put forward. One must always be striving to be better than they were. Absolute perfection was the unattainable and ultimate goal. Confucius asserted in the Analects, to subdue oneself and return to propriety is perfect virtue. If a man can for one day subdue himself and return to propriety, all under heaven will ascribe perfect virtue to him.
Confucian teachings about humanity assume the idea that humanity is mostly good and can perfect themselves. Shame was seen as a major tool in bringing about perfection. Without shame, one scholar wrote, the individual had no chance of self-reform. Confucius said himself, if you lead the people by regulation and regulate them by punishments, they will seek to evade the law and have no sense of shame. If you lead them by virtue and regulate them through rights, they will correct themselves. Parents were responsible to bring their children up in accordance with the teachings of Confucianism, and shame often played a big role in this. For example, in the family, parents were allowed to use any form of corporal punishment in order to bring about obedience in their children. If all else failed, they were allowed to disown their child. In extreme cases, a rebellious child could even face the consequence of death for his actions. All of these punishments were used in an attempt to shame the child into following the teachings of Confucianism.
So if humans are expected to be perfect, how do they get there? Confucius described this concept with two words, li and ren. Li refers to ritual and protocol, basically the works you need to perform ren. You could carry out li through ceremonies and rites like ancestor worship or something along those lines. Ren refers to good works like love and benevolence, which make a person human. Together, these two concepts were the foundation for the standards that define perfection.
Since perfection of the self was most important, it makes sense that man's responsibilities are based on the inward first. You need to work on your personal growth as you work to be the superior man. After putting proper attention to correcting your own faults, you can then move on to making your family better. After oneself, duty to the family is most important. In Confucianism, there is a hierarchy of love, starting with your parents and moving outwards from there. Parents are the main focus because they gave you life and provide for you. And filial piety is the reciprocation of this love, as well as an example of respect for one's parents. As we talk about the outcomes of Confucianism, it's important to look at more than just the teachings. How did the application of those teachings play out in real life? One area where Confucianism fails in application is emotional satisfaction. Confucius found peace in order and stability. But what happens when that order and stability is disrupted? So much of Confucianism finds its foundation on the physical things of the world that when those physical things fail, as all do, followers of Confucianism are thrown into emotional turmoil. What should they do? How should they fix it? Why does this happen? Did they do something wrong? As time went on and Confucianism began to deteriorate, other religions like Buddhism became increasingly popular. Religions like Buddhism provided a more clear representation of the supernatural, and they satisfied the emotional needs of their followers.
The family structure set forth by Confucius is a patriarchal system. The father works to provide for his family, the mother takes care of the home and the children, and sons learn to follow after their father's example to carry on the family lineage, while daughters start helping out at home at a young age. Filial piety is very important and is the base for Chinese culture. Within filial piety are 5 key relationships: parent, child, husband, wife, elder brother, younger brother, friend, and ruler, subject. Face is an important idea too, and problems at home are often left ignored or buried to save face and avoid shame for the family. The focus on family and its structure has caused problems for the Chinese. One syndrome found in certain Chinese families is the firstborn daughter, FBD, syndrome. FBD syndrome can happen to anyone despite birth order, but it is most common in the firstborn. Daughters are not as valued as sons in Chinese culture. They take on duties at home at a young age, and some girls develop FBD syndrome as a coping mechanism. This is manifested in difficulty with interpersonal relationships, as they are usually very rigid and emotionally unstable. The stress of their many responsibilities at home also contributes to them not doing well in school. Some FBDs might do very well when not under stress, but low functioning FBDs can over time develop full blown borderline personality disorders. FBDs also have a higher sense of shame and guilt, and have an intense fear of rejection. Their focus on the concrete and simplistic coping mechanisms they use leaves them trying to better themselves, but unequipped to deal with their intrapersonal issues.
Another issue in China is rampant political corruption. The Confucian view of how to protect from abuses of power relies on the moral commitment of government leaders, and it does not offer safeguards against corruption in political institutions. This reliance on man's perfectibility leaves people vulnerable to corrupt leaders with too much power. Confucianism, as we can see, does not offer a firm foundation for a healthy view of man. It teaches a high ideal that a sinful man can never attain, which leads to issues in worldview and application. Confucianism offers a way to live an orderly life, one without chaos. It is attractive because you can do it all yourself. Confucianism is based on the idea that you don't need anyone else. You can achieve order all on your own. In a beautiful contrast, Christianity says that we don't have to do it all on our own. We need God to save us, to pick us up, and to provide the strength we need to get through life. Whereas Confucianism talks about empowering the individual by making him perfectible, Christianity empowers the individual by providing a saving grace that makes up for the imperfection.